1 minute and counting. Looks like we got lots of LMI people here. And then Chantel. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Awesome.
Good.
Good, Steve.
No complaints. It is beautiful outside right now.
Very
There we
nice.
are.
Yeah, it's nice here too in Ontario. It's finally nice.
22 degrees down here, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, you got us beat. I think it's about 18 right now, but it's way better than it's been. We got flooded on the long weekend, so
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Not good.
yeah.
Well,
By the
that
By
just-
the way, Steve, you did a fantastic job earlier today on that other webinar. One of the best I've been to.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, very, very good.
I can't have that kind of feedback too often.
I was getting writer's cramp writing stuff down so fast, right?
I was asking a couple of people that were chatting with me after. I was moving a little bit too quickly, so hopefully it all came out and it wasn't too much too fast. So
No, I thought the pace was good.
Okay.
Of course, I've been exposed to some of that stuff, so maybe it came easier to me. But I thought the pace was perfect. So,
well, the Canadian team is light years ahead of everybody else anyway, right?
we'll go with that.
I don't know. I would say it's 4 o'clock. Well, 3 p.m. Eastern right now. Like Tanya did, because some of the confusion might be logging in. Some of you may have more experience with Zoom than some of the others. There was about 25 people that registered, so we'll give them a 2-minute window, and then if they're still not here, then too bad. We're going to roll on, and I've got lots of cool stuff that I want to share with you guys. So,
Steve, it's Ray Covellis here in Toronto.
yes, sir.
I'm going to jump off in 30 minutes. I need to get you something else as well. So I just wanted to get on and experience this with you. So thank you for inviting me.
What's that? What was that last part? I'm sorry.
I said thanks for inviting me.
Oh yeah. Thank you for coming, and hope. Well, I'll see if I can front load it so most of the information's in the first 30.
Yeah, don't rush us on my account. Maybe I can just grab I'm sure you got a deck you're going to go through. Maybe I can get a copy when you're done.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
But I'll be around for the first 30 minutes or so.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, well, it's 2 minutes after. We may as well get rolling. I'm going to put my PowerPoint up here. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Tanya did an incredible job last week regarding the topic. I had it out here regarding the topic planning and managing work in uncertain times. And she laid out an awesome plan of action for people and questions for them to be able to go through from step by step. Really fantastic information. And from a business perspective, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the personal side of things. And I'm also going to put you to work. Part of what I do is facilitating for immediate action. So I've got some things that I want you all to work on as we're going through this. And I'm going to hopefully at the end of this presentation, there's at least one thing. That's always my goal and my hope. One thing that you can immediately take action on and that you will continue to use on an ongoing basis. So that's my intent here at the end of today, for you guys to gain at least one thing, maybe more than one, but hopefully one thing where you say, you know what, I've really got to start working on this today. So I'm talking about the delicate balance of work and life. We've all had this question. I've had multiple people ask me, how do you get work-life balance? I'll tell you a little bit of a personal story for me. When I started in this business with LMI, leadership development back in 2008, one of the promises that I made to myself, because one of our I'm going to say foundational leadership principles is the understanding and the value of your time and how to use it properly. So for me, I had a lot of people say, and that I was telling them that I'm starting this business, and a lot of people say, it's going to be 100-hour work weeks for you for a while. And for me, that wasn't acceptable. So, and the reason for that is I can't rightly, with good conscience, tell people that you can do it in 40 hours, but I'm doing it in 100. So I made a really conscious decision at the beginning of this business to only work 45-hour work weeks on a consistent basis go forward, because I wanted to be a product of the product, and I didn't want to feel like I was a hypocrite saying my clients can do it, but I can't. So obviously there were 100-hour work weeks, but consistently I can say over the past 12 years, I've been able to manage my schedule to make sure that it's 45 or less on average every week for the last 12 years. So I know that it's possible. I've been able to accomplish a lot of things in those 12 years that I'm proud of and excited to be, part of my life. And I'm going to share some of those with you as well. But without a doubt in my mind, it is possible to get more done in less time, or to do twice as much in the same amount of time. And that's really how we define productivity, is doing the right thing in the right way at the right time for the right length of time. So that's part of it. Productivity is not just a business concept. It is also a life or personal concept. So, and a lot of people think when we're talking productivity, we're only thinking about what's going on at the office. Well, I'm going to make sure that at the end of this, you'll start to understand that maybe it's the opposite is more true. So when I dive right into this, I'm going to just dispel a myth to you right away. And that is, there is no perfect equation of balance. There is no magic pill. It's not 50-50. A lot of people say, well, work-life balance should be 50% work and for 50% business, 50% personal and 50% business. Well, that's not true, because people are different, and it really depends on all of your different priorities, the things that you consider to be important. Paul Meyer tells us that everyone is designed with constructive discontent. And Barry knows I shared this earlier. And what I love about this statement is we all know when we ask ourselves, can we do better? If we're being honest with ourselves, the answer is always going to be yes. And Jim Rohn said it like this. He said, if you can do better, should you? The answer is always going to be yes. If you're capable of doing better, then why wouldn't you do better? So why would you leave this planet with undeveloped talent? We know that when it comes to balance, we have to ask ourselves, which is more important? And I ask this to clients constantly. Which is more important, personal life or professional life? So for you out there, and if you're muted, you can actually press the space bar and it'll unmute you while you're holding the space bar. I'd love to hear between personal life and professional life, which is more important? If anybody cares to share.
Personal for me.
Personal life. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah,
Work to live.
Personal life.
I'm hitting my personal goals. I'm much more engaged with my professional life.
Absolutely. Would it be pretty much a consensus across the board that if we're being honest with ourselves, our personal life is actually the more important of the two, right? I've had one person in 12 years say professional life, and I really don't think he liked his family too much. So, and he was as honest as the day is long. He really meant it. So I had the conversation with him afterwards. So that's truly what he believed. But if we're honest with ourselves, our personal life is more important than our professional life. And if that's the case, the follow-up question must be, are your actions proof? Right? Think about that for a second. If personal life really is more important to you than professional life, are your actions proof? Do your actions prove to everyone in your personal life that that is absolutely your priority? And again, I think most of us, if we're being honest, we're probably going to say no. So if the answer is no, then it's time to make some adjustments, right? And sometimes these adjustments aren't easy. They make us uncomfortable, but we have to realize we only get to live once. However, whatever age the average age or lifespan is nowadays, it's not very long. It doesn't matter how much time you think you have to make adjustments later may never come. And like I said before, Paul Meyer said, why would you ever leave this planet with undeveloped talent? So I'll give you two analogies, two scenarios. If I was to ask you what your favorite season was, and I'm just going to answer for you guys just for sake of time, but let's say I ask you what your favorite season is, and you said, well, spring is my favorite. And I'll use spring because that's my favorite. It's my favorite time of year. Every day seems better than the previous, and I just love how things come to light. So the secondary question on that is, how many springs do you have left? Right? I'm 45 years old. Let's say I live to be a healthy age of 80. That means I have 35 springs left. And when I put it into that particular context, it actually makes me realize 35 springs is not really that many. Right? And I'm not trying to be morbid. I'm trying to be, I want everybody to think about the sense that there's no time to wait until tomorrow. Now is the time to take action. I'll give you another scenario. My mother just turned 70, excuse me. And let's say I decide that I want to visit her once a year, or maybe that's what my consistent activities are showing. I'm visiting her once a year. She lives in Nova Scotia. She's about a 4.5-hour drive from here in Moncton. And if I want to visit my mom once a year, that means I will see her 10 times before she turns 80 years old. Okay, let that sink in for a second. That's not a whole lot of visits, right? Obviously, when I count that off and I look at it that way, I realize I really do need to spend some more time with her if I'm only visiting her once a year, right? I hope and pray that she makes it to the age of 80. Actually, I hope and pray that she makes it well beyond 80 years old. But the time that how I'm deciding to use my time, if I'm not visiting her more often than that, shows that maybe my personal isn't my priority, right? The amount of days that we have in a year it quickly goes by. And I don't know about all of you, but I notice as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize the day seems shorter and shorter. It seems like I just woke up this morning and it's already 4 o'clock here, right? Time flies by, especially when you are not paying attention to time. And as Paul Meyer says, he said, a bucket that's kicked over deliberately gets just as empty as one with a hole in it, right? So time is wasted in minutes, not in hours. Anthony Robbins says, when would now be convenient? Got to stop asking ourselves when the convenient time is in the future and start saying, now is the only convenient time. If I'm really serious about this, now is when it's convenient. So based on all of that information, how much more time are you willing to give up before you finally make a change? How many times should I be visiting my mother? I'd kind of like to see her 50 or 60 times before she turns 80. So what does that even look like? Without a plan, there's no way that's going to happen, right? And yes, I will have to move other things around in order to make that happen in the first place. But if that's a priority to me and I truly am being honest with myself, then that's a change that I need to make. I'm using that as one example. There's probably 15 or 20 or 30 different examples that you can think of in your own life. So we are motivated, and this is something that you should always remind yourself. Where 80% of our motivation comes from is a loss to be avoided. So, for example, if I say I want to get in better shape, and the benefit to that is I can fit back into those pants, my favorite pants again, because I love those pants. That's good. That does motivate me a little bit. But what motivates me a whole lot more is I'm sick of being out of shape, and how much more time am I willing to be out of shape before I finally just make the decision to do it. And 6 months from now, if I'm in the exact same shape that I'm in today and don't feel great about my fitness, I'm not going to be very happy about that. So in other words, now is the time to take action. Losses to be avoided is always the best indicator of how motivated you are to succeed at any particular task or whatever it is that you're working on, right? It could be a financial thing. I want to make sure that there's the next COVID-19 scenario, that if it ever happens, hopefully it doesn't, that I'm not living paycheck to paycheck when that happens. Because I know exactly how I felt living paycheck to paycheck not having anything saved up. So I will never allow myself to be put in this situation again. Just as an example, that is way more motivating than it would be nice to have $5,000 in the bank, right? So here's where I'm going to put you to work. Everybody, I hope you have a piece of paper with you. Some of you are familiar with this, but it might be a good time to go back and reflect and look at it again anyway. It's one of those things that we ask our clients to take a look at least once every 4 months in their My Time. So here's my exercise. Total balance means that you have total balance in your total person wheel of life. So there are 6 different areas that Paul Meyer has identified here: financial, career, mental, educational, physical health, social, cultural, spiritual, ethical, and family and home. What I want you to do on a piece of paper, I want you to write each of those down, however you want to orient that. Make sure that there's a title there. And I want you to give yourself a score out of 10 on a level of current personal satisfaction for each of those 6 areas. So for example, if you felt like you were a 7 out of 10 in the financial and career, then give yourself a 7. So write down financial and career and put a 7 next to it, or a 7 out of 10 actually, so you know what the 7 means. Everybody there? Once you have that, then I just want you to now put a number beside each of them, put them in priority order from most important to least important. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean any of them are not important. I just mean from a personal priority list, what's number 1 through number 6 on that list. Put them in order. Everybody's good there? Just trying to see everybody's faces to see if you're with me or not.
Yep.
Or still working. You're good? Okay. So now that you have that order, I want you to draw a line underneath everything that you've just written, and I want you to put 1 through 6 sequentially down your page underneath. Oh, and also tally your total score out of 60 as well. I meant to mention that earlier. So give yourself a total score out of 60 in the top. So if you got a 7 out of 10 in financial and career, and you add it to a 5 out of 10 for mental and health, or mental and educational, so on and so forth, give yourself a score out of 60. And that'll be your baseline. Okay. Now you have 1 through 6 at the bottom. You have ordered all of the sections in priority sequence, and you've given yourself a score on each of them on current level of satisfaction. Okay. Underneath where you've put those numbers in order, the section of the wheel that you have put down as priority number 1, underneath where it says number 1, I want you to put down an action or a habit that you can consistently do in your schedule that will raise your level of satisfaction in that particular area of the wheel of life. For example, family and home. If you were a 6 out of 10 and you wanted to improve that, it could be quality time with my wife or my husband, right? Or quality time with my kids. That could be the action, attitude, behavior, habit that you, if you spent more time in that particular area, it would increase satisfaction. So do that for all 6 sections. Chantel's flying. I'll call you out later. Everybody's fairly confident in your list. If you're not done, it's okay. We can give you another minute or 2. Some of you, I can't see it all, so I'm just going to assume that you're already done grabbing yourself a new cup of coffee and chilling with your feet up. Okay. So for the rest of us that I can see, and everyone else as well, now next to each of those habits that you just wrote down, write down how much time per day, per week, or per month that you should spend on that particular activity. So again, if it's quality time with your family, in order for family and home to increase satisfaction, decide, is it 3 hours a day? Is it 10 hours a week? Is it 25 hours a month? Whatever that might look like. If it's physical and health, and the habit is going to the gym, is it 3 times a week for an hour each time? Like, decide exactly how much time you should be spending on that particular habit. You guys didn't think you were going to have to do this much work, did you? Guys and gals, I meant. Okay. So if the total person wheel of life is the ultimate indicator of balance in your life, and again, everybody here would be different. There's no magic pill to balance. Everybody's balance will be different. Everybody has different priorities, right? So, but if the total person wheel of life and the way you evaluate yourself initially is the ideal indicator of where you're in balance and where you need some additional time and effort, then the list that you just created based on your priorities is what? What did you just discover?
Gaps.
Gaps? Gaps in your wheel of life? Absolutely.
Imbalances.
The imbalances that you have. What tends to happen is if we spend a whole lot of time focusing on one area, what happens to the rest? Right? And we've all had this conversation at some point. My job is to work. I'm the provider. I got to work my butt off. The rest of those things I'll have time for those eventually, but right now I really have to focus on this. And a lot of people will put financial and career at the top, and then everything else sort of slips off the radar a little bit because that becomes their new identity as the provider and the career individual that's in the house, right? And then 20 years later, you're looking at your family and home and saying, what happened? I missed it. My kids are already out of the house and I can't go back, right? So having this little evaluation tool, it shows gaps, like Barry said, and where your imbalances are. It's a great baseline for you to look at and say, okay, well, we talked about earlier, which is more important, your personal life or your professional life? And everybody here, I believe, without exception, said personal. So if you look at that wheel of life and that list that you just created, what you've identified is the exact plan of action that will give you what? If you follow through on everything on there, as well as the times that you've indicated, what's going to happen?
You think you'd increase your quality of life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How could you possibly not move towards more personal satisfaction? Unless you're lying to yourself, right? Sometimes we do that too. But if everything on that list is accurate, and it doesn't mean it can't be adjusted later, maybe you spend some more time thinking about it and say, you know what, maybe not this particular habit, but this one would be more effective in that area. That's fine. Having that time with yourself to evaluate where you're at and what you should be working on is exactly how you find the balance that's important to you. So if you actually start taking action, you just created a plan of action. If you start taking action on all 6 of those items and gave it the amount of time or even less time for now until you can build up to that time, right? A lot of people, when they say my New Year's resolution is to get in shape, so I'm going to spend 3 hours at the gym 7 days a week. And then at the end of that first week, they're thinking, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy. So if you have to work up to some of the times that you've indicated on there, that's fine, right? But if you start following through on those actions, you couldn't possibly have any other result than increasing your satisfaction score in every area of your life. As simple as that, right? I know it's a 15-minute conversation that we're having. But one of the reasons why we rarely ask ourselves these questions is because we grew up in a school system that conditions us to answer questions instead of ask. Right? As I went through school, I became very good at following the instructions of the teacher. And when I did that, I got really good grades and I got promoted to the next grade and so on and so forth. So because I was so good at answering questions, you start to think that maybe that's what you're supposed to do in all cases. So sometimes you'll see, a lot of you probably work with people that wait for instruction. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's because they've always done that since the age of 5, going to school. They've followed instructions. So when they have a boss or a leader, they're expecting to be instructed on how to proceed. Well, our own life works exactly the same way, because we've been focusing on what other people want for so long. All of the priorities that we know, it's not rocket science, all the priorities that should be in our life, we tend to put those things off in order to prioritize other people's lives and other people's priorities. Sometimes our boss, sometimes someone else in our life, right? So as soon as we start asking this 15-minute conversation, asking ourselves these questions, we come up with things that are really, if you think about it, quite profound. You know for a fact that if you follow through on this, your life will change. 80% of our motivation comes from losses to be avoided. 6 months from now, do you want to be in the exact same position that you are, or do you want to be more satisfied, like you've indicated, on that total person wheel of life? If the answer is I want to be more satisfied in every aspect of my life and stop ignoring the ones that seem less important, because I know they're all intricately connected, then the result is inevitable. Paul Meyer says, whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. The part that most people forget is the act upon at the end of that quote. I believe it, I desire it, but I don't act upon it. And as soon as you actually start to take action on that list, you will see that your life will begin to change. So my challenge at this point would be not necessarily to implement everything on that list. You've put them in priority order. What I would suggest is that you start with number 1. And however long it takes for you to actually have that become a habit in your everyday life, become who you are. They say it takes 21 days of continuous application of a new habit or consistent application of a new habit in order for it to become permanent. Then take 21 days for each on that list. And if you did that multiplied by 6 at the end of that time period, we're talking drastic change, but in such a positive way that you wonder why. You ask yourself, why did I not start this 10 years ago? Right? And it seems so simple. It really does. And the answers have always been right inside your head. Right? But what we tend to do is we get so busy and it's like, well, I'll get to it later. Tomorrow is promised to no one. When would now be convenient? Now is the time to start. You already know that your personal life is more important. It's time for your actions to actually support that belief and show and prove to the people in your life and to everyone else in the world that that's who you are as an individual. It's not going to be easy because you're going to want to go back to the tendencies that you've always lived. And that's why you have to bring yourself back to a reminder of the type of satisfaction that you want. So always have that list somewhere handy that it can remind you of where you're at and what you're working on. And if you go slowly through each of the items on that list and form those habits, at the end of that 6-month period of time, or 4-month period of time, go through the wheel of life exercise again. See where you're at. Your satisfaction went from a 31 out of 60 up to a 37. That's a huge jump. How do I get from a 37 to a 42? That's another huge jump. How do I get from a 42 up to a 50? And imagine spending the rest of your life thinking like that. How do I get 1% better, 1/10 of 1% better every single day? Well, that is one formula for doing it. Anybody have any questions about what we just went through?
That was good exercise.
What was that? Sorry?
Steve,
It was a good exercise.
Excellent.
Steve, what are the expectations around certain times in your life when you have to concentrate on one area to really bring that up to speed, and how do you justify the other areas of your life at that time?
That's a great question. So yeah, there are going to be seasons when there might be something that takes a lot of your time. And I'll give an example. It may or may not be the example that you're thinking, but if you had a loved one that became ill, for example, and you had to spend 6 weeks in the hospital with them, or on a daily basis going to visit them on a daily basis, and that's way outside of the standard routine that you have, then you would make adjustments, and there would be parts of that wheel of life that would suffer, of course, right? Because your priority is, in that particular case, family and home. So maybe your routine at the gym may have to be cut in half or something like that. So you do make concessions depending on the season that you're in. And then once that season is, hopefully that person fully recovers, and that season has passed, then you can actually go back and readjust to make sure that you're spending all the right amount of time in each of the areas of the wheel of life. That's another reason why balance is not a magic pill. So for each and every one of us at different points in our lives, different sections of that wheel of life has been our top priority. And as long as we keep evaluating and say, okay, financial and career was for 2019, this section's way out of whack. I got to get this back in place. Most people don't have the tools in front of them to evaluate those things. And if they did, they'd probably make different decisions on how to get back there quickly. So when you do go through a season that pulls you way out of norm like that, then as soon as you can, then reevaluate and get yourself back on the activities to bring the level of satisfaction in all areas of your wheel of life back up. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I was just thinking, when I was a new dad and had two little babies, they were a year and a half apart. And, I gave up basically working out so I could parent and be a dad and take care of physical needs. But what gave me solace after a while was that it was my choice. I was choosing to be with my kids and not to work out. And so I had control over that. So that helped me in that unbalanced part of my life. So it's, having control and ardently desiring what I wanted and acting upon it. So I did have, a choice in the matter and felt in control over that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% in control of your balance, 100% control of your schedule and your time and how you prioritize where you spend your time, right? And so just because you were sacrificing one part to spend more time in the other doesn't mean that you were out of balance. So that was the new balance for that season, if that makes sense. So you have to shift that wheel of life depending on the circumstances that are surrounding you, as long as you stay true to your personal life comes first, right? As long as we stay true to the foundation that the personal life that we are trying to build is way more important than this professional life that's out there. Hopefully they're intimately connected, but it's really about the people you surround yourself with. And I had this conversation with a client here about a year ago, and he started working longer hours because he wasn't sure whether or not his wife wanted to spend time with him. So every time he was home earlier in the day, she always seemed annoyed, almost like she was interrupting his schedule. So his insecurities obviously kicked in a little bit, and he thought, well, maybe my role is no longer to be home at supper time because she's so used to this. And so long story short, he ended up having a conversation with her, emphasized refocusing and getting his marriage back to being his number one priority. And what he discovered through all of that was the reason why he started his business in the first place was to build a life together with his wife. And that had escaped him. That sort of slipped off the radar because he had been working for so hard for so long. Well, as soon as he started to discover that she was the foundation of his success in the first place, then all of his energy went back into developing and building a successful marriage. And as a result, his business grew as well. And he did it in less time. So it's all the where we put our priorities. And sometimes we do let our conditioning, our insecurities get in the way of us making really good decisions.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's something else that I want to share with you. As soon as I find it. So it is called the time matrix. It is. I just really want to. I want to share this with you really quick. Switching between two PowerPoints at the same time, I didn't realize was such a challenge, but it is. So I'll just warn everybody out there. Here we go. All right. So just want to share the time matrix because I find this very profound and I think it goes right along with balance in our life and the wheel of life. Some of you may be familiar with the time matrix, but how I describe this is that absolutely everyone's time, including everybody here on this call, your time breaks down into 4 quadrants. There is, I don't know if you can see that, hopefully you can. There's urgent, important, not urgent, important. There is urgent, not important, and not urgent, not important. So all 4 of those quadrants, everybody has pieces of their life that falls in these 4 quadrants. So urgent, important is things that must be done yesterday. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a formula. So must be done immediately. I say must be done yesterday because it's the things that stress us right out until they're finally completed, right? Appears to be high priority. So when the phone rings and your number 1 client says there's a problem, you drop everything, you try to help that person, right? Or you try to solve the issue. Can't be delayed. It's got to be done immediately, as well as the fact that it's an imperative, right? In quadrant number 2, which is not urgent, important, goal setting, tracking, planning, scheduling, training, communicating, organizing, and so on and so forth in that quadrant, right? It's not urgent because we can push it off. For example, if I'm in the middle of a planning session, trying to plan out my next week, and I get a call from client number 1 that says, I've got a problem, what most people do is say, I'm going to put my scheduling and my planning aside, and I'm going to fix this problem. So it's things that we can delay because of the level of urgency doesn't appear to be there. Even though it's still really important, we can put it off. Or I was planning on going to the gym today at noon, but now somebody wants to meet with me, so I'll skip my gym session. So me time also falls in quadrant number 2. Quadrant number 3 is not important, urgent. So meeting others' priorities, it's low priority to you, busy work, procrastination, unrelated to your goals. So how I explain this, quadrant 3, everybody says, how can it be urgent and not important at the same time? Well, it doesn't mean it's urgent to you. That's the key. Somebody else's goals. I say this is OPP and OPG, other people's problems and other people's goals. Because we want to be so helpful. We love to help people. When people go to our office in a panic and say, oh my gosh, I need your help. I need to get this done before 2 o'clock. It's 12 o'clock now and I can't get it done without your help. What most people do is drop everything and help that individual. What most people should do is say, absolutely, I want to help you every single time that I can, but please give me at least 48 hours of heads up beforehand. And I'll scratch my calendar and I'll give you all the time in the world. Because what we end up doing if we drop everything every time somebody needs a hand is that's exactly what they believe, how they believe we're supposed to respond. So we've trained them to believe, and this is personal or professional. Now, this is not just at the office, although it does happen at the office probably more often, but dropping everything for everyone else is a quadrant 3, not important, especially if it's activities that don't help you accomplish your particular goals, okay? And then quadrant 4 Of little or no value. This is not important, not urgent. Of little or no value, non-productive, waste of time, waste of others' time, and irresponsible. So we call this the irresponsible quadrant. We all have some of this in our time. You're thinking there's no way. I don't have anything that's not important and not urgent. All of my time is spent being extremely productive. Well, we've got to stop lying to ourselves. Okay. And this doesn't mean watching a movie in your downtime is quadrant 4, because sometimes you need rest and relaxation. Or if you like to read a John Grisham novel, that doesn't fall in quadrant 4. Quadrant 4 is when you know you should be doing something else, right? If there's a project that you're supposed to be finishing up, there's a room downstairs that you've been putting off painting and you keep delaying it because you say that these other things are important, and then that's the irresponsible quadrant. I know I can be getting that done, but I'm focusing on this. At the office, it works the same way, right? There's a project that I could be working on, but instead I'm surfing on Facebook to see what my friends are saying about their meal that they had last night, right? That's a quadrant 3 activity. So the key is quadrant number 1 is reactive. We never have a pre-plan around that. It's something that happens that makes us drop everything. Emergencies would fall under that particular quadrant as well. Quadrant number 2 is proactive. The reason why the quadrant number 2 is more important than quadrant number 1 is because the only way to reduce quadrant number 1 is to spend more time in quadrant number 2. So if you want to be less reactive, then you have to start planning more. Yeah, you have no choice. If you find that your life is constantly firefighting and you're reacting to things personally and professionally on a regular basis, it's because you're not spending enough time deciding how things are going to be laid out. As simple as that sounds, 1 hour of planning will save you 10 in the field, right? And this has been studied and studied and studied and studied. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute too. Quadrant number 3 is deception. So we are deceiving ourselves into believing it's something that's important, but it really isn't. It's important to someone else. And that doesn't mean they're not important and helping them is not a good thing. It just means if you're being distracted from what your priorities are by focusing on someone else's, then we're deceiving ourselves. And then of course, quadrant number 4 is irresponsible. And I'm happy to share this with absolutely anyone that wants a copy of this as well. So the goal is to eliminate quadrant 4 as much as we possibly can. Eliminate quadrant 1. You can't eliminate 100% of quadrant 1. Most individuals spend between 60 and 80% of their time in quadrant number 1, right? In fact, 80% of the decisions that you make on a daily basis are automatic decisions. They're autopilot decisions. I drive home the same way every day. Do I remember how I got here? No, I just end up showing up at my door because I absolutely do the exact same thing every day. 80% of your decisions are automatic. Only 20% do you do them on purpose. Imagine if you could reverse that. Now we're talking about spending time in quadrant number 2. Deliberately taking action on the things that are important to you, meaning quality time with your family, going to the gym, me time, whatever that happens to be. That's more proactive. I would much rather at the end of my life say I tried everything to accomplish everything that I wanted to accomplish rather than I did everything that everyone else wanted me to. Right? Reactive versus proactive. We need to say yes to quadrant 2 and say no to quadrant 3. If you're ever wondering, what are the things that you need to say no to more often? And we all have a hard time with that, right? Saying no. Somebody asks us to do something, we want to say yes. Well, it's anything that distracts you from your goals and or prevents you from accomplishing your goals. Sometimes we have to say no to things that are good in order to say yes to things that are great. All right. So that's the time matrix. I know that's a whole lot to throw at you. Like I said, I'm happy to share that with anybody. You're welcome to get a copy from me. So based on the time matrix, based on everything that we've just talked about, daily planning, what does a successful day look? What does a successful week look like? And what does a successful month look like? And all of those things lead to what a successful year looks like and what a successful 10 years look like. We have to decide. Paul Meyer says that it is the having goals are a result of the becoming goals. Who do I want to be 10 years from now will have a direct correlation with all of the things that I've been able to have in my life, whether that's having great relationships or whether that's having a new car. It doesn't matter. All of those things comes from me becoming what I'm capable of. And that total person wheel of life is a step one baseline way of you looking at, this is the person that I want to become. Once I have all of these things happening on a consistent basis in my life, I will be leading by example in a way that doesn't require words. Right? People learn from what they see, not from what they hear. And I'm always inspired by somebody that's doing something, not because somebody's talking about it. Do you ever notice that? Maybe they talk about it too, but they always do it. Or if you're talking about major athletes and things like that, or any type of personality, we're inspired by the doers. And if we want more people around us to do, then we have to show them how, by doing it ourselves. And that's how we can impact everyone in our life in a positive way, by becoming the person that we're capable of becoming. So on that note, hopefully that wasn't too much to unpack in 50 minutes. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take some questions. And if there's no questions, then it just means that I facilitated the crap out of this today. And I will take that as a compliment.
Oh, it's well done.
Excellent.
The time matrix, how often do you apply that to personal versus work?
We talk about it probably more often in the context of work, but it definitely applies to the family unit as well, right? Interruptions and things like that. From a time value perspective, one interruption a day that takes 20 or 30 minutes of your time will add up to 22 8-hours a day, 22 8-hour days per year, I should say. So a month. So we do apply that to work-related tasks quite often. How do we reduce interruptions? But in the home, it's the same way. Those interruptions can prevent quality time and being present and things like that. So there may not be a salary that's on the line there, but their time is worth more than any salary you could be paid anyway. So I would say, based on my experience, probably 80-20. Just to answer your question easily. Any other questions? No? Amazing. And we finished on time. We started a couple minutes late and finished on time, so that's not bad. I hope everybody is going to be here. I'm actually going to hand it over to George really quick, if that's okay with you, George. Just to share with us the topic, because we have another Leadership Essentials series webcast next week at the exact same time. And I'd love, George, if you could give us an example of what's upcoming.
Yes. So Natasha, she's on the call as well. She's going to be the speaker next week. And I don't have right now the topic exactly. My computer was just
I put you on the spot there.
Yes.
I warned you in advance that I was going to ask you.
Yeah. So Natasha, I don't know if you can mention a little bit about your topic next week.
Okay, so can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm doing this Zoom meeting for the first time on an iPad to see how it works. So I apologize. The settings are just a slight bit different than on the computer. So next week we're going to be doing Goal Setting 101, specifically turning KPIs into executable goals with team engagement. And I'm not talking about pizza parties for engagement. We're talking about actually progressing your company's goals further and having them run the show. This is a concept that big businesses, small businesses seem to miss a great deal. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last 20 years before moving into LMI, was taking big businesses' KPIs and teaching them how to execute them. So that's what we'll be talking about next week. This is not rocket science, but they're little tips and tricks to get your team rolling on their own. And let me tell you, when you got 20 people pushing that cart up the hill, it goes a heck of a lot faster than when you're dragging it. So that's what we'll be talking about next week.
Absolutely, yeah. So the African proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, which I think is appropriate to basically what you just said. And share the invitation. The invitation is going to go out probably by end of day tomorrow. We're going to be putting it out on LinkedIn as well as some other social media areas. Please share the invitation to participate in Natasha's webinar next week very generously. That we have up to 100 spots available, and I would love to see lots and lots of people benefit from what she has to say and share next week. So on that note, it's been a pleasure. It's beautiful outside. Get outside, enjoy some sunshine, and start ticking off the number one on the list that you created. And if there's anything I can do to support you in any way, don't hesitate to reach out to me anytime, anyway. So pleasure, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
great day, everyone.
Great night.